There is a new leader of the world's 1.4 billion Roman Catholics, and he is a stunning choice. For the first time in history, the Pope is American.
The Queen of Power Ballads has had an incredibly successful career, but she's been plagued with death and illness along the way.
Inside a centuries-old church in Rome, away from the cameras and crowds, Pope Leo XIV did something that instantly shook the foundations of religious tradition. His unexpected meeting wasn't with a cardinal or world leader. It was with global music icon Celine Dion. What happened next left witnesses speechless. No ceremony, no agenda, just a moment that many are still trying to understand. What really happened in that old church? Join us as we reveal what Pope Leo XIV did with Celine Dion inside a church that shocked all religious people. Two icons at a crossroads. Sometimes the most unexpected stories begin quietly. No spotlight, no press release. Just two lives, two names the world knows well, moving in different directions, only to find themselves in the same place. Let's start with Pope Leo XIV. A name that still feels new to a lot of people. Just a few months ago, in May 2025, he was elected the first American pope in the history of the Church.
Cardinal Robert Prevost becomes the first pope from the United States.
He didn't just hear people, he really listened. Not just to what they said, but to what they carried. He was never the loudest voice in the room, but people followed him because they felt seen. And that's not all. He's also known for being someone who brings people together, not just Catholics, but people from all walks of life. He doesn't act like he has all the answers. He just shows up, pays attention, and cares deeply about justice, about fairness, and about those who feel forgotten. That's who he is. That's who the Church chose. Now, shift the focus to someone from a completely different world, Celine Dion. For decades, she's been one of the most powerful voices in music. But recently, it's her silence that's spoken the loudest. Her battle with stiff person syndrome took her off the stage and out of public view for years.
Celine's doctors methodically eliminated disease after disease, coming to a conclusion.
Have been diagnosed with a very rare neurological disorder called stiff person syndrome.
It was heartbreaking for her fans, but even more so for her as a performer who lives through her music. She disappeared, but she never let go. Then, in 2025, something changed. Her voice came back, not just in music, but in spirit. Her performance at the Paris Olympics opening ceremony wasn't just a comeback. It was a moment of strength, a sign that she was still here, still standing, and still singing. Then came the documentary, I Am Celine Dion. People expected a behind-the-scenes story. What they got was something more honest. She let the world see her pain, her limits, and her faith. She didn't preach or pretend, she just opened up. In that documentary, her Catholic roots came through, not in grand gestures, but in the small, steady way she spoke about trust, peace, and holding on when you don't know what's next. Recently, she was seen at a place where no one expected. Not in front of a stadium crowd or an awards show, but in Rome. It was all hush-hush, no big announcement, and definitely not a press tour. She came for a medical consultation. A leading neurologist based in the city has been working with her on long-term therapy. That part of the trip was about science and treatment, about her body and her health. But the other part, the one no cameras followed, was about something else. She didn't come to Rome as a celebrity, but as someone who needed space. Not because she was in crisis, but because she needed time to think, feel, and breathe. She didn't ask for attention or chase headlines. She simply followed her instincts, those same instincts that brought her comfort as a child, growing up Catholic. That same quiet pull she's always felt toward places where she could be still. Here's where the story starts to take shape. Because while Celine Dion was finding her way through the streets of Rome, Pope Leo XIV was also moving through the city, not with big crowds or formal ceremonies, but in his own quiet way, meeting people, listening, and showing up where most wouldn't expect him. Two people, one from the world of stage and spotlight, and the other from the heart of the church, each on their own path, each coming from struggle and searching for something that can't be scripted. But without knowing it, they're about to find themselves near the same moment, in the same space and same silence. That's what makes this story feel so different. It's not a story about fame, and it's not even about religion, at least not in the usual way. It's about something deeper, something that comes when life has stripped things down to what matters most. It's about one person who leads millions with prayer and humility, and another who once filled stadiums with her voice, now whispering her way back into the world with grace. There's no blueprint for this kind of moment, no planning or build-up. Just the slow steps of two lives that have been through a lot, coming to rest in the same city at the same time. What happens next is what shocked the religious world, which we reveal next. The unexpected meeting. Celine Dion didn't come to Rome to be seen. She wasn't on tour, and there weren't any reporters waiting outside her hotel. After months of working through her recovery, she was trying to make space for herself again. Rome is a loud city, but tucked away in its back streets are churches that feel frozen in time, places where the air is still, where the walls hold more than sound, and where the outside world seems to stop. That's where she went, a small, old church just off the tourist path. The kind of place where no one expects cameras. The kind of place where people light candles for people they miss, not for likes. She had been there before, quietly, during other visits to the city. He had stopped in without warning, like he often does. That's been a pattern with Pope Leo XIV since he was elected. No announcement, no spotlight. Just him, walking into small parishes on his own, especially when he feels the weight of the world creeping in. This wasn't a scheduled visit. He hadn't come to speak or to be seen. He came to pray. At first, neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. Celine looked up just once, and in that moment, there was a kind of silent recognition between them. Not like fans meeting a star, or like followers meeting a leader. It was something quieter, like two people carrying something heavy, each able to see that weight in the other. What happened next is what religious watchers are still trying to wrap their heads around. Pope Leo didn't move toward the altar. He didn't kneel at the front. Instead, he walked over to where she sat, and without ceremony or fuss, he sat beside her. No one said a word. There was no formal blessing, no cameras or choir, just two people sitting in a church, both looking for something, comfort, maybe, or peace, or space to breathe. That alone was unexpected. A pope, stepping away from tradition, choosing not to lead, but to sit, right next to someone the world knows, but who, in that moment, was just another soul trying to feel less alone. Then came something even more surprising. From the folds of his sleeve, Pope Leo took out a small wooden rosary. No gold, no jewels, just plain wood, polished by age and use. He placed it in her hand, gently, not like he was offering her a gift, but like he was sharing something simple, something he carries when he doesn't know what else to do. She held it, not with surprise, but with understanding, like it made sense without needing to ask why. After a long pause, she opened her journal and slid it slightly toward him, just enough so he could read a few of the lines she'd written. No speech or full story, just a few words drawn and scratched out and rewritten. One part caught his eye, a sketch of a microphone with a small question underneath it. Will I ever sing again? And that's when everything in the room seemed to slow down. Because in that simple drawing, she said more than most people can with 1,000 words. He didn't respond with advice. He didn't quote scripture. He just sat there. Two people, one leading the church, and the other finding her way back to the stage. Both were sitting in a quiet church, sharing a silence that didn't need to be broken. While many have tried to explain why this moment shook so many in the Catholic world and why it moved even those outside of it, The truth is, it wasn't about theology or rules. It was about presence. What shocked people wasn't that they met. It was how they met. Not in a palace or on a stage, but in a pew. Like equals, like fellow travelers, and this wasn't a planned visit. It wasn't history being made on purpose. It was something simpler, and maybe for that reason, even more powerful. It was one of those moments that couldn't be staged even if someone tried. Quiet, human, and somehow unforgettable. More happened after that, but we'll get to that in the next chapter. The message beyond words. What happened next inside that quiet Roman church didn't feel like a headline. It felt like something people weren't supposed to see, but somehow needed to hear about. After their shared silence in the pew, Pope Leo XIV stood and walked slowly to a side chapel. He didn't motion for anyone to follow, but Celine, still holding the wooden rosary he had given her, followed him anyway. The chapel was small, with chipped stone columns and dim light. A single candle burned in front of an old painting of the Virgin Mary holding the body of Christ. The kind of image that speaks louder the longer you stare at it. Mary's face was tired and sad, but calm. Christ's body, lifeless, heavy in her arms. It wasn't polished or shiny, and it didn't need to be. Pope Leo didn't say much. He didn't need to. He simply lit another candle, then quietly stepped aside. He gave Celine the space, just her and that painting, a moment not shaped by ceremony but by silence. This wasn't part of a mass. There was no blessing, no music, and no crowd. Just the soft sound of the flame flickering and the steady breath of someone who's been carrying a lot. People who heard about this later described it not as a religious act, but as something more personal, like someone holding a door open for another person's pain to have a place to land. For Pope Leo, this kind of quiet presence isn't new. He's never been a loudspeaker. He believes in actions over words, especially when it comes to pain. He often says, not in interviews, but in passing, that suffering doesn't have to be wasted, that it shapes us, not to break us, but to clear away what doesn't matter. That thinking comes from the spiritual tradition he belongs to, the teachings of St. Augustine. Augustine didn't write to impress. He wrote about struggle and about how the soul grows when it's forced to face the hardest things. He wrote about how, even in heartbreak, there can be something that holds. Whether Celine had read Augustine or not didn't matter. She understood what it meant. Her body has gone through pain most of us will never understand. Her voice, the thing that gave her purpose and identity, was no longer something she could trust fully. But she showed up anyway. She sat in that chapel not to be healed, but maybe just to feel seen by something greater than herself. For her, faith was never loud. It was quiet, but steady.
I was really hoping that I'd be good to go by now, but I suppose I just have to be more patient and follow the regimen that my doctors are prescribing.
Not something to put on display, but something to return to when there's nothing left to hold on to. In that room, with no script and no camera crew, something honest took place. People later said they were shocked not because she was in a church. That had happened before. Not because the Pope met her. That alone would have made headlines, but because of how he met her. He didn't bless her from a distance. He didn't stand over her, and he didn't quote doctrine. He simply stood back, let her take the space, and gave her something older than words. Silence, warmth, and time. In a world that so often moves too fast, where leaders talk more than they listen, this moment cut through. This was not the Pope performing a role. This was a man, deeply grounded in his beliefs, choosing to be present without needing to fix or explain. For Celine, who has always lived in two worlds, the public and the personal, it meant something that this meeting wasn't for show. It wasn't part of her documentary. There were no producers, no press. In fact, the public didn't even know it had happened until days later, when a visitor to the church mentioned it online. There was no official photo and no statement, just a few scattered words and a growing sense that something different had happened, something that couldn't be planned. This kind of spiritual moment doesn't check boxes. It doesn't ask who's religious and who's not. It doesn't care about stage lights or church titles. It shows up when someone lets their guard down and someone else is willing to sit beside them without trying to take control. In the end, what made this moment so powerful wasn't that it involved a global icon and the leader of the Catholic Church. It was that neither of them acted like they were those things in that room. They were just two people, each with their own kind of pain, each with their own faith, standing near a candle and a painting, letting the silence say what words couldn't. Maybe that's the part people found hardest to explain. It wasn't about what was said, it was about what wasn't. Don't miss the final and emotional chapter. Why this moment moved millions. At first, barely anyone knew what had happened. There were no headlines, no official photos, and no press statements. It was a moment that was meant to stay private, but then someone who had been sitting at the back of that small Roman church posted a grainy photo. You couldn't even see their faces, just the backs of two people kneeling in silence at the front pew. One of them was clearly Pope Leo XIV. The white robe gave that away. The other figure, less obvious, was Celine Dion. Word started spreading like wildfire. Religious blogs picked it up first, then music forums, and before long, it was all over the internet. People asked the same question over and over: what were they doing there together? The reactions came fast. Some people thought it had to be a staged photo. Others said it was probably connected to her documentary, but most saw it for what it was, something real. There was no microphone, no lighting crew, and no post from the Vatican's social accounts. Just a simple photo and a lot of emotion behind it. Priests, nuns, and everyday people across the world started sharing what the photo meant to them. Many saw it as a sign of a different kind of spiritual leadership, not the kind that shows up only at big public events, but the kind that sits with someone quietly, one that doesn't preach, but listens. Some priests wrote about how they were tired of having to say the perfect words during hard times. They said this moment reminded them that sometimes presence is enough, that a hand on the shoulder or just being there in silence can carry more meaning than a sermon ever could. Even outside the Catholic Church, people were paying attention. Evangelical pastors, rabbis, imams, and spiritual leaders from other backgrounds spoke up, not to analyze it, but to say it made sense. It didn't matter if someone was Catholic or not. Anyone who had ever suffered or sat beside someone else in pain could feel what was going on in that photo. This wasn't about theology. It was about shared humanity. Celine released a short statement a few days later. She didn't go into detail, and she didn't name the church or try to control the story. She just said she met someone who carried a lot for the world, and for a short time, he helped carry her too. People connected with that because, let's be honest, most of us want someone who understands. Someone who doesn't try to fix everything or give all the answers. Just someone who says, "You're not alone in this." Pope Leo never mentioned the meeting directly, but not long after, during a homily, he talked about music. He said that when someone sings from the heart, it's a form of prayer. And he spoke about pain, not as something to hide, but as something that walks with us, like a road that leads somewhere deeper. He didn't need to say her name. Everyone knew what he was talking about. What do you think about the meeting between Pope Leo XIV and Celine Dion? Kindly share your answers, thoughts, and opinions in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this channel to enjoy more videos like this. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.